Who was the first human to discover gold? Part 3. Gold had already become a symbol of power, but humanity was about to take its obsession with gold to an entirely different level. What started thousands of years earlier as a strange, shiny pebble found in a river would slowly become something much bigger. Gold would become wealth, it would become status, it would become a symbol of kings, and eventually it would become something people were willing to fight, conquer, and even die for. Think about that for a second. A material that you can't eat, you can't drink, it can't grow your crops, it can't keep you warm at night, and yet humans would spend thousands of years chasing it. Why? Part of the answer lies in something very simple. Gold lasts. It doesn't rust like iron. It doesn't rot like wood. It doesn't slowly disappear when exposed to rain and sunlight. A piece of gold can sit underground for thousands of years and still look almost the same when someone finally pulls it back into the light. For ancient people, that must have seemed almost impossible. Imagine finding something that looks exactly the same as it did generations ago. Your grandfather could have held it. His grandfather could have held it. And hundreds of years later, it would still shine. To people who didn't understand chemistry or geology, gold may have seemed almost eternal. And perhaps no civilization became more fascinated by this idea than ancient Egypt. To the ancient Egyptians, gold wasn't simply another valuable material. It had a much deeper meaning. Gold was closely connected with the gods, the sun, and eternal life. Its bright yellow color reminded people of sunlight. And sunlight meant something far more important than just a bright day. The sun rose every morning. It disappeared at night. And then, somehow, it returned again. To the Egyptians, this endless cycle was connected with life, death, and rebirth. So gold fit perfectly into their world. Who was the first ham? It didn't decay. It didn't lose its shine. It seemed to survive almost everything. That made it a powerful symbol of eternity. And the pharaohs understood exactly how powerful that symbol could be. They used gold to decorate temples, statues, jewelry, ceremonial objects, and royal treasures. Gold wasn't just something beautiful sitting in a box. It was a way of showing people who was powerful. If a ruler could surround himself with gold, he was showing everyone that he had access to something rare. Something that ordinary people could never afford. And when you think about it, humans still do something similar today. We use expensive things to show success. Ancient rulers simply had their own version of it. Only their version could fill entire rooms. But the Egyptians didn't stop there. Their fascination with gold continued even after death. When powerful rulers were buried, gold objects were placed inside their tombs. Jewelry, masks, decorations, weapons, furniture, ceremonial objects, and countless other treasures. They believed that the journey didn't end when a person died. The ruler would continue into another existence. So I leave behind everything valuable. Take it with you. That belief created some of the most extraordinary treasures ever buried beneath the ground. And here's the strange part. The people who created those treasures probably never imagined that thousands of years later, strangers would still be standing in front of them completely amazed. Imagine being a craftsman in ancient Egypt. You spend days shaping a piece of gold. You carefully hammer it. You polish it. You make one tiny mistake and the entire design could be ruined. Then someone important wears your creation. A pharaoh, a priest, a member of the royal family. Your work suddenly becomes part of something much larger than yourself. And because gold survives for so long, your work would outlive you by thousands of years. That's one of the reasons gold is so fascinating. The person who shaped it may have disappeared from history, but the gold remained. And Egypt wasn't the only place where gold was becoming important. Far away, another civilization was growing between two great rivers. Mesopotamia. Here, its cities were becoming larger. Merchants were traveling farther. People were trading goods between communities that could be separated by enormous distances. And gold was right in the middle of this growing network. Merchants could carry gold across deserts and rivers. They could trade it for valuable goods, spices, timber, gemstones, fine materials, and other rare objects. Gold had an advantage that almost nothing else had. People wanted it almost everywhere. A merchant could travel to a place where nobody spoke his language. He might not understand the local customs. He might not know the people. But if he showed them gold, they immediately understood that he was carrying something valuable. No translator was needed. No long explanation was necessary. A small piece of shining metal could say everything. I have something you want. And that changed trade forever. Gold began traveling across the ancient world. It moved from one community to another, from one merchant to another, from one kingdom to another. And every time it changed hands, its importance seemed to grow. It wasn't just a beautiful metal anymore. It was becoming a common language of wealth. But humans weren't satisfied with simply finding gold. They wanted to do more with it. And this is where ancient craftsmanship became incredibly impressive. Gold is soft compared with many other metals. That made it difficult in some ways, but incredibly useful in others. Ancient craftsmen could hammer it into thin sheets. They could bend it, cut it, twist it, shape it into tiny beads, and polish it until it caught the light. Over time, people became better at working with it. They experimented. They made mistakes. They tried again. One generation learned from the previous one, and slowly, goldsmithing became a real skill. People began creating necklaces, rings, crowns, ornaments, ceremonial objects, and other decorations that were far more complicated than the first simple pieces of gold ever made. At this point, something important had happened. Gold wasn't just being collected anymore. It was being transformed. A rough nugget could become something beautiful. A flat piece could become a symbol. A handful of tiny pieces could become a crown, and that crown could completely change how people looked at the person wearing it. Gold had become art, it had become craftsmanship, it had become technology, but most importantly, it had become power. And once gold became connected with power, people wanted more of it. Kings wanted bigger treasures, temples wanted more offerings, merchants wanted larger supplies, rulers wanted to prove that their kingdom was richer than the kingdom next door. And this is where the story becomes much darker, because whenever humans discover something valuable, someone eventually asks a dangerous question: why should they have it and not us? As stories spread about lands filled with precious metals, greed followed them. Kingdoms began looking beyond their own borders. Maybe there was gold in the mountains, maybe there was gold in another river, maybe another kingdom had a huge treasure hidden somewhere, and if they did, why not take it? Armies marched across difficult landscapes, cities were attacked, treasures were stolen, rulers fought rulers. People who had nothing to do with gold found themselves caught in conflicts over it. And that is one of the strangest things about gold. The same material that once seemed like a harmless little curiosity could eventually become a reason for enormous conflict. Think back to that first prehistoric human. They were standing beside a river. There were no kings, no armies, no banks, no markets, no giant temples, just a person, a river, some stones, and one strange golden object. Maybe they picked it up because it looked beautiful. Maybe they carried it home. Maybe they showed it to someone else. Maybe their family kept it for years. They had absolutely no idea what would happen thousands of years later. They couldn't have imagined pyramids covered with golden treasures. They couldn't have imagined royal tombs. They couldn't have imagined merchants carrying gold across deserts. And they definitely couldn't have imagined entire kingdoms fighting over it. Yet that tiny discovery was the beginning of a story that would continue for thousands of years. Gold had gone from curiosity to decoration, from decoration to status, from status to wealth, and from wealth to power. But there was still something humans didn't understand. Something much bigger than kings, kingdoms, and treasure. Where did gold actually come from? Ancient people could find it in rivers. They could dig it out of the ground. They could see it inside rocks. But none of them knew where the gold itself had originally been created. And the answer is far stranger than you might expect. Because the gold on Earth wasn't created here. It wasn't made inside a prehistoric river. It wasn't produced by ancient miners. It wasn't created by Egyptian craftsmen. And it wasn't born when Earth itself formed. The story of gold begins much earlier. Billions of years before humans existed. Billions of years before the first trees. Before dinosaurs. Before the oceans looked anything like they do today. Before Earth had even become the world we know. Somewhere in the enormous universe, violent cosmic events were taking place. Stars were being born. Stars were dying. Matter was being thrown across space. And in some of the most extreme environments imaginable, the ingredients needed to create incredibly heavy elements were being forged, including gold. Yes, the gold sitting inside an ancient Egyptian tomb. The gold discovered beneath the soil at Varna. The gold hidden inside mountains. And even the gold found in a tiny river thousands of years ago has a story that began before our planet existed. That means when an ancient human picked up a golden pebble from a river, they weren't just holding a rare piece of metal. They were holding something unimaginably old. Older than humanity. Older than civilization. Older than the first cities. Its journey had begun billions of years earlier, somewhere among the stars. And somehow, after an almost impossible journey through cosmic history, that material ended up on Earth. Then nature did the rest. Mountains formed. Rocks broke down. Rain and rivers moved tiny particles across the land. Humans discovered them. They shaped them. They buried them. They traded them. They fought over them. And eventually, they turned them into symbols of wealth that would survive thousands of years. That's what makes the story of gold so incredible. It isn't really just the story of a metal. It's the story of humanity itself. Our curiosity, our creativity, our desire to create beautiful things, our need to show status, and sometimes, our greed. A tiny golden flash in a prehistoric river may have looked meaningless, but that little discovery started a relationship between humans and gold that never truly ended. Even today, thousands of years later, we still treat gold as something special. We still wear it. We still save it. We still give it as a gift. We still put it in museums. And we still dig deep into the earth searching for more. But now we know something those first humans could never have known. The gold they found wasn't born on Earth. Its story began billions of years before the first human ever existed. And if you think that is unbelievable, wait until you discover what kind of cosmic event may have created the gold that eventually reached Earth. Because the next part of this story takes us away from ancient rivers and buried tombs, and straight into the darkest, most violent places in the universe.